Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy Reeves, the head blender of Cornell and Deal Pipe Tobacco Company, and today I wanted to talk to all of you about the practice of cellaring and aging tobacco, and why people do it, and the sorts of things that you can expect to come from it, and how to start your own cellar, how to approach keeping your own cellar. So I am currently smoking some Steamworks from my own cellar that was released last year, and I'm impressed in how this blend has softened. I'm also impressed in the ways that the flavor has sweetened, and I think that with more time, those effects are going to continue to amplify. I'm going to expect, based on this, that really soft, really mellow smoke here. But with a deepening and more pronounced sweetness, and I'm also noticing some of the more intense aromas, the distinct tobaccos that we used in Steamworks, the older Oriental tobaccos and the Perique. I'm noticing that some of the more volatile compounds in those tobaccos are more fragrant even now than when we first made this blend. We just got done making this year's iteration of Steamworks, and so kind of seeing what it was like fresh off the table, and then going back and visiting this 10 that spent a year in my cellar, it's pretty cool to be able to kind of have those side-by-side comparisons. Cellaring is a practice that probably happened by accident. I don't think that you could find a lot of pipe smokers that were aging their tobacco back in the 40s and 50s, for example. Pipes were treated in a much different way, had a different place in society and culture, and pipe tobacco was more of a commodity than it was something that would be treasured and collected and treated like wine. It just didn't have that sort of connoisseur element to the way that pipe smokers thought about their tobacco by and large. But probably through some sort of accident somewhere along the way, people began realizing, hey, there's carbohydrates in here, there's natural sugars in here, and there are the building blocks of fermentation in pipe tobacco. Of course, in cigar manufacturing, fermentation has for a long time been a big part of how tobacco that would then be used to make handmade cigars has been treated, but nobody was really thinking about this in pipe tobacco quite the way that we now do. And cellaring, I think, has become much more popular as people have had access to the internet and not had maybe friends that introduced them to pipe smoking, but more their own curiosities just searching the web. I think that a lot of people have learned a lot in a really short period of time about pipes and pipe tobacco through the internet that maybe before you really had to meet the right person to know about a particular carver, or to learn about a particular type of tobacco, or something that would have been pretty arcane several years ago, like cellaring, like aging, but that seems to have become much more popular, and I think that the internet plays a role there. Aging tobacco is pretty simple. My approach to it is keep the tobacco in the airtight container that I purchase it in, unless I am purchasing tobacco in a bulk bag. The reason is that even though there is a Ziploc or a vacuum seal of some kind on that bag, the plastic that makes up that bag is not actually fully gas impermeable, so it's not truly airtight, And so that causes two problems. One, there's basically pores in the plastic that over time will leach out moisture, but those pores will also absorb a lot of the flavor compounds that are developing through the course of fermentation and aging. So I always recommend, if you want to cellar a product that you bought in bulk, transfer it to glass jars, seal them up really tight. You don't have to have a canner to do this. You don't have to use a pressure cooker or anything. Simply put the tobacco into the jar, press it tightly, but not jammed in there. I think that packing a jar about I don't know, a little tighter than you would your pipe is probably not a bad rule of thumb. I don't crunch the tobacco into a jar when I'm transferring it, but I want to pack it fairly densely, and then I want to leave a little bit of air up at the top. That oxygen can help sort of kickstart the fermentation process. It's also why Cornell and Diehl doesn't vacuum seal our tins. The air in the tin actually allows for advanced fermentation activity, and I think that my experience with Cornell and Diehl tobacco is that it does actually change a lot more over the first year or two than many other tobaccos that I've had that were packed in vac sealed tins, where it's just really taken a lot longer for them to achieve those same sorts of results. The fragrance, the deeper sweetness, the softening, the rounding, all of those things that really make old tobacco even more delicious than it was fresh. The other thing is thinking about temperature. Where you store your tins unopened, or where you store your glass jars of bulk product that you want to cellar, should be dark. It should not be in direct sunlight, and it should not be in a place like the bathroom or the kitchen, where you've got lots of fluctuations in temperature and humidity. It needs to be in a place like a closet. My cellar is pretty standard Rubbermaid tubs that I can stack tins in and move them around easily, and organize stuff inside of, that I just keep in the bottom of a closet that is located sort of centrally in my house, so that there's not a whole lot of fluctuation of temperature and humidity in that area, and that there's no direct sunlight that is coming in contact with my jars. So, and that's really about it. Every once in a while you might want to go through and check seals on things, particularly on our tins. Over time there can be expansion, and it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes that tin can expand to the point that it actually breaks the seal. So it's not a bad thing to every once in a while take a look at your cellar and just kind of see, what have you got in there, how long have you had things. We keep a production date on the bottom of the tin, so you know exactly the day that the tobacco went into its airtight container. If you are transferring tobacco to jars, you can write that date or even just the month and year on the lid of the jar. That way you kind of have an idea how old this is. It's always good to go back and just kind of look back and see what you've got in your cellar, and provides you a good opportunity while you're reveling in all of the tobacco that you've collected to also check and make sure that everything's doing okay in there. Other manufacturers' tins can also lose their seals for different reasons, and so if you've got vac sealed tins, sometimes those edges can get bumped, and then you've got a broken seal that now you've got tobacco that, rather than cellaring, is just drying out. So the last thing is, if you've got a well-aged tin, the thing that makes this so special is really, as I mentioned before, the creation of all these volatile sort of compounds. Volatile meaning that they react with oxygen. And so when you open that tin and begin enjoying those things, that's literally them dying. That's literally these new compounds dissipating into the atmosphere around you as you smell it and as you taste it. So Once you open a well-aged tin, you really want to consume it with friends. You want to consume it quickly because you don't want to hang on to something for 15 years and then open it and then come back to it after having had it open for 5 or 6 months and find that it's a dud now. Where when you opened it, it smelled amazing and tasted amazing. So really enjoy it while those things are still present in the tobacco, because they will waft off over time. That's the long and the short of aging. Of course, the really long of aging is just that process and the patience that it takes, but stick with it. When you buy tobacco, I always recommend buying something to enjoy now, so that you have a frame of reference for what it tasted like relatively fresh, and then buy other tins for laying down in your cellar and coming back to later. And if you find something that really seems to go in a direction that you think is interesting or that you are really into, then maybe buy more and set them down for longer. And if you've got a selection of tins that are all one style from roughly the same time period, it's kind of cool to be able to go and try it at 5 years, try it at 10 years, and really find the place where you think this has blossomed to the place that you most are interested in enjoying it at. And then you can kind of time those things out. It's fun. And yeah, it just requires some patience and a dark closet. That's really about it. So hopefully that helps to give you some ideas about cellaring and aging. If you have other questions, smokingpipes.com customer service can certainly answer those, and there's a lot more information on the Daily Reader as well. So thanks so much, guys. Talk to you next time.